Happy Easter, 4th and 5th graders. During this short video of your Sunday school lesson, you might see some eggs that are hidden. So watch for those. And by might, you never know what's going to happen around here. First, we're going to pray, and then we're going to get started. Dear merciful and mighty God, we thank you for your perfect plan. We thank you for all that you went through. And we thank you for the outcome of the resurrection. Help us to see what you want us to see and help us to change like you want us to change. In Jesus' name, amen. All right, I have some questions for you to start off with. How's your hair? How's your mother's hair? How's your dad's hair? Another question I have is on this, everything's on a screen for now. Do y'all fight over the screens? Does everybody have their own? Are you sick of that? Does it seem normal to you? Can't wait to hear what all you have to tell me when we're together. We're going to start with some memory work of the 10 Commandments. We'll do the sign language. So go do it with me. Commandment 1 is what? There's no other God before me. Commandment 2, do not bow down before idols. Do not worship other idols. Commandment 3, do not take the Lord's name in vain. Commandment 4, remember the Sabbath day to keep it holy. Commandment 5, honor your father and mother. Commandment 6, do not murder. Commandment 7, do not commit adultery. Commandment 8, do not steal. Commandment 9, do not lie. Commandment 10, do not covet. Good job. Today our story is lesson 7 and 8. Lesson 7's on the Last Supper, which became the Lord's Supper. And lesson 8 is the resurrection. First of all, I just want to go through that, give you a timeline of that week and make sure you understand there are so much in the Bible that takes place in just these few days. And there's no way we can talk about it all. But just so you get the calendar. Okay, so on Sunday, before the crucifixion, was the triumphal entry. It was when Jesus rode into Jerusalem on a donkey and people were worshiping him and they were throwing palm branches on the ground. It's a palm branch. And then there was Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and Jesus was spending a lot of time in the temple there. And then Thursday, and that's when the Last Supper was, and that's when the Lord's Supper was instituted. So here's the cup, and here's the bread. And then it's Friday, and that was the day of the crucifixion. It's when Jesus was crucified. And then there's Saturday, and Saturday was the Sabbath, and we don't really know what was happening there, but people were observing the Sabbath, so they were resting and they were sad. And then Sunday, and wouldn't you love to know what God and Jesus were doing that day? And then Sunday is Resurrection Sunday, and so the tomb was empty, and the Lord had risen. So I just wanted you to see the order of things. This book has very colorful pictures, and I think we need it. So I'm going to show you the pictures and kind of tell you this story, which you probably know it, but hopefully there'll be something new that you haven't thought about before. This is the people lining up to throw their palm branches on the ground for Jesus to walk on or to ride the donkey on as he comes into Jerusalem. And if you remember, Jesus has just raised Lazarus from the dead. And so people are worshiping him and starting to follow him. But the rulers, the chief priest and the Jewish rulers, were not happy about this. And I know we talked about last time that after Lazarus was raised, they were concerned that this was going to be, I think they might have thought it was going to be an earthly king. Either way, they were jealous and not happy about it. So they were trying to figure out how to get Jesus away from the crowds so they could off with him. Then on Thursday, there was an upper room that Jesus and his disciples met in, and for what's called the Last Supper, or what we call it now is the Lord's Supper. Jesus told his disciples a lot during that supper. And one of the things he told them was he washed their feet. And, he knew he was about to go away and was not going to be with them every day. And the points he wanted to make to them were, I want you to love each other and I want you to serve each other. That's important. It's kind of what you think about, what you would say to someone if you weren't going to be with them anymore. What is it you wanted them to know? Also, at that supper, he knew that one of his disciples, how that must have hurt, was going to betray him. Do you remember who it was? Judas. Judas had gone to the leaders and said, hey, I can help you capture Jesus when there's not a crowd around. And they paid Judas to do this. And during this supper, Jesus said, one of you's going to betray me. And then a little bit later in the supper, he said, Judas, just go on and do what you're going to do. And what I want you to see there, and from every step of this story, of these events, Jesus could have stopped what was happening. He could have stopped Judas. He could have stopped the arrest. He could have stopped the crucifixion. But he did not. Why? He was obedient to God, number one. Number two, he knew this. He was fulfilling prophecy. Remember in the Sermon on the Mount, he said, I did not come to abolish the law, I came to fulfill it. And all of these things had been prophesied, and he is obedient and he's humble enough, and he loves us enough that he went through this. The disciples sang a song together, and then they left the upper room and went to the Mount of Olives. Jesus was going into the Garden of Gethsemane to pray, and he took his disciples part of the way in, and then he left them, and he went further in. And when he left them, he said, I am just overwhelmed with sorrow. Would you please pray with me? What do you think they did? Do you think they prayed with him? You know what they did? They fell asleep. You know what? I think I would have done the same thing. Not on purpose, but we're just so human. And he also told them at this supper, he said, he was trying to prepare them for things that were going to happen. And he told Peter, he said, y'all, you're going to deny me. Peter was, oh, no, we're not. Well, I would never do that. And we'll see in just a few minutes that, of course, he did, and you've heard it before. But Jesus said, yeah, Peter, before the rooster even crows 3 times, you will have to, before the rooster even crows, you will have denied me 3 times. So they went into the garden, and Judas had arranged a signal so that the soldiers would know who to capture and arrest him. And Judas went up and kissed Jesus. This is a picture of the arrest. And Jesus said, you know, you don't have to do these signals, and you don't have to bring your weapons. I'm coming with you. And he even said, I could ask the Father right now to send down legions of angels to rescue me, and it would happen. But I'm not going to, because this very event was prophesied, and I am fulfilling prophecy. This is a picture of, see the rooster up on the rooftop? So sure enough, Peter said 3 times, he even used curse words. He said, no, I don't even know that guy. I'm not with him. And then the rooster crowed, and Peter knew what he had done and was very sorry. When I was in Jerusalem this summer, walking around Jerusalem, you could hear a rooster crow fairly often, and I would always think of this story. Then he was arrested. The ruler Pilate couldn't really find anything wrong that he had done, but he wanted to please the Jews, and they were just riotous and yelling, crucify him, crucify him. And they put a purple robe on him. They made fun of him. They struck him on his face. They put a crown of thorns on him and yelled, and Jesus could have stopped it, right? They even asked him, are you the king of the Jews? Or what have you done? And he was calm and trusting. He did not try to retaliate. He did not defend himself. He submitted humbly to this awful ordeal. And then he was crucified. Pilate gave up, said, okay. He was crucified with other criminals. While he was on the cross, at one point he said, why have you forsaken me, God? And just at that point, he was separated from God. And he had never been separated from God. I can't imagine how much that hurt, not to mention his physical pain, but he was separated because he was bearing our sin, and God can't be with sin. So he had to separate in order for Jesus to bear our sin. And the people that were crucifying and were saying, well, if you will believe, we will believe. If you can get yourself down from there and save yourself right now, then we will believe. And Jesus still continued to submit. And right before he died, he said, it is finished. And what was finished? The plan for paying for our sin was finished. And when that happened, there was an earthquake. The rocks split open. People were raised from the dead. The temple curtain ripped. And then the soldiers said, oh, this must have been the Son of God. Then they believed. Next, they took him down and they buried him in a tomb. Here, this kind of, see the that squiggly line in the mountain, that is depicting the earthquake. Then they took his body down and buried it in a tomb. And the Pharisees and chief priests went back to Pilate and said, this guy was a fake. And he said before, when he was alive, that he was going to rise for the dead after three days. If his disciples get in there and steal his body, they'll tell everybody that he's risen from the dead, and we've got to keep that from happening. And Pilate was on board with that. He did not want to be messing with that. So they made sure the tomb was closed up and sealed. They put a guard there, and Pilate said to them, you do anything you have to do to make sure that tomb is sealed and no one can get in. Well, it was early in the morning, the third day after Jesus died, and the women didn't go there on the Sabbath because they didn't do anything on the Sabbath. And but when the women got to the tomb, Jesus' body was not there, and they had to go tell the disciples. And Peter and John went running, and John will be the first to tell you, he got there first. And they went inside and saw Jesus' grave clothes were lying there, but Jesus himself was gone. And then they believed. Before they weren't so sure, but now they believed. And there were angels that were in there, and shining as bright as lightning. And 2 angels came to Mary, who had stayed outside the tomb, and they said, "Why are you crying?" She said, "Someone has taken my Lord away, and I don't know where they've laid him." And she knew he wasn't there, but she hadn't quite believed that she hadn't understood that he rose from the dead. And Mary turned and saw another man standing there, and she thought that was the gardener. And she asked him, do you know where he is? And all of a sudden, this man said, "Mary." And then Mary knew that was Jesus. She recognized it, and she worshiped him. And sure, she wanted to grab onto him, and Jesus said, "Don't hold on to me. I have not yet ascended to the Father, but go to my brothers and tell them that I am ascending to my Father and your Father, to my God and your God." So Mary returned to the disciples and told them she had seen the Lord. Now, we tell this story every year, don't we? But we do it because everything in the Bible to this point was predicting this, leading up to this. And everything after this was because of this, because of the resurrection. I have one more reading for you. It's from Thoughts to Make Your Heart Sing. It is called Finished. Just before he died, Jesus shouted from the cross, "It is finished." What was finished? Jesus was saying, everything you need to come back home to God, everything you need to be free and happy in God, everything you need to live forever, I've done it all. It wasn't a cry of defeat. It was a shout of victory. The great work of rescuing us was finished. There is now nothing you can do to make God love you more, and nothing you can do to make him love you less. It is finished. Thanks be to God for his indescribable gift.